The human race will go extinct, and not that much more time. Under the hard truth, it explains what we've overlooked. It explains why we've overlooked it, and the fact that we will go extinct.
UnLost Cause is a community that shares stories of individuals 40 and beyond who found the courage to reclaim their dreams and live without regrets. I'm David New, and I hope these stories help you find joy, purpose, and passion in a life true to you. Captain D.C. Anderson is a living example of what it means to reclaim purpose and impact later in life. After a decades-long career in the oil and maritime industries, he chose not to retire comfortably, but to double down on what many would call a lost cause: climate change and community wealth disparity. In his 60s, he founded the Earthship Program, an innovative financial environmental initiative designed to create generational wealth for underserved communities through a tax-sheltered carbon reduction model. At a time when most slowed down, Captain Anderson went bigger, leveraging his experience, education, and conviction to design systems that serve both people and the planet. Welcome to UnLost Cause.
Good to see you, David.
All right, let's start. There's a lot of amazing things that you're doing. So to provide some context for the viewers, can you share with the audience what, in maybe 2 or 3 sentences, what is your lost cause that you're turning into an unlost cause?
I became concerned about the climate when I was in the oil business because I think it was 1988, which coincidentally was the hottest year that the Earth had experienced at that point. We've gone way past that now. But it's also the same year that Dr. James Hansen introduced global warming to the U.S. Congress. But as I'm sitting on my barge, oil-carrying barge, in January, in my shirt sleeves, I was pretty sure there was something wrong with the climate, but I didn't have a clue what it was. Later, by the mid-90s, I understood what it was. And by 2000, I'd sold my barges and tugs, not just to help the planet, but because there was just no market for the oil business in my size of equipment. And that's when I really became interested in it. But here's the thing. While I didn't know as much about carbon then as I do today, I did know there was more to the problem than I was able to describe by talking about the weather. I just knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And it took me another 19 years up until 2019 before it finally dawned on me. And here I am. And I figured out something that I guess the rest of the world, it hasn't dawned on them yet. Not because it's too complicated, but because it's too simple and too obvious. They've just overlooked it.
Wow, that's going to be amazing to uncover as we go along a little bit later. But, one of the things that we always like to start with at UnLost Cause is that, the community knows that a lot of our dreams and aspirations start when we're kids. So I always like to rewind the tape and talk about, as a child, did you grow up near the water, like fishing, sailing, exploring, or was that something that you didn't grow up by and that you yearn for? And that's just trying to understand how you got into this love of maritime.
Okay, well, I was very fortunate. My mother's second husband had a cottage on an island that had no electricity, had water but no electricity, about 54 cottages on it. And I grew up with the most divine situation that any child could ever possibly hope for. We were on the water, we were clamming, we were fishing, we were sailing, water skiing, doing everything. It was a gorgeous way to grow up. But I was kind of a troubled teenager and kind of unhappy. I enlisted in the Marines a year before the Tet Offensive, but they wouldn't take me because I'm blind in one eye. So the Marines made a good deal by not letting me in. So I went deep sea. I hitchhiked to New York with a sea bag over my shoulder. I tried to get on merchant ships, but there was a problem with the unions and me not belonging. And I'm crossing the street, 14th Street. And I didn't know where to go or what to do. And I didn't have a lot of money in my wallet, so I was going to go to sleep in the park. And I asked him, the guy said, "Where's Madison Square Park?" And he just points, he goes, "That's over there, New York." And I said, as a glib little boy from the country, "Well, is it a comfortable place to sleep?" And the guy turned around and looked at me like I came from the moon. He said, "What are you, crazy? You won't make it through the night." He said, "All right, come with me." And I walked with him, and I went upstairs, and he was an architect. And we chatted all night long, and he gave me some advice. So I went to City Island, got off the bus when the masts were the tallest down at the end there. There's where the biggest vessels were. And I got hired on a vessel that was going down to the Caribbean, because I had a maritime background, obviously, on water all my life. And that's how it started. And then I spent the next year or so sailing around the world's oceans, traveling. I didn't pay off. That's not true. I jumped ship. I abandoned the ship. The one I was on, it was a Baltic trader built in the 1890s, believe it or not, with no power to speak of. We never used the power at sea. We used it in the port sometime. And I sailed halfway around the world on that one. We got caught in the doldrums. I'm 18 or 19 maybe. We got caught in the doldrums for 58 days. Water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Yeah, well, that's where we were. I've got a picture of the ocean 3,000 miles from land that's so flat you can see your reflection in the middle of the friggin' Pacific Ocean. That was something. But we ran out of food. I mean, I'm not fat now, but I'm 185. But when I paid off, I was 147 pounds.
That was a natural Ozempic.
Yeah, so I hid in the jungles with the help of a man I met who gave me a cottage. And every morning I'd go to the edge of the cliff and I'd look down in the harbor and see the ship was still there. Finally, when she left, I felt I could come down. And as I came down, you got to picture this now. This is kind of funny. I mean, I'm 18 or 19 years old. I got my sea bag over my shoulder, not a one red cent in my pocket. I'm come down to this sandy road and palm trees. I have to turn right or left. There's nothing anywhere. So I turned to the right and I walked for a while. And then I saw a nice cottage and a very pleasant woman came out. And we spoke and we're trying to communicate in French. Hers was better than mine, obviously. And so she hired me and gave me a place to stay. And I woke up the next morning, I was a bartender at Club Med. So that's how I went to sea. I had various adventures, but then ultimately I went back to the States and went to college.
Yeah. And Captain Anderson, what was it that you loved about being on the water?
Who knows what it is, but it's like nothing else. I would rather be at sea than almost anything. I'd rather be at sea on a sailing vessel than almost anything. I don't want to be at sea on a yacht, these plastic Benetous and things like that. No, they don't do anything for me. And these yachts like Bezos has and those kind of things, that's simply ridiculous. But to be on a big wooden ship is like heaven. And at night when you're laying in the cockpit down there, you're in harbor, you're at anchor, and a little bit of swell will come into the ocean and the vessel will just move ever so slightly. And as she goes to rock back again, you can hear this creaking and groaning, and that vessel is talking to you, and you really feel safe. I love it. I don't like spending months and months at sea without coming ashore. That's what you do in the merchant business. When I went into tugs and small cargo vessels and whatnot, they call them the romance runs. I was on the romance run out of New York down into the Caribbean, into the Amazon, whatnot. That was good. I enjoyed that too. But sailing for me is the way to go, which, by the way, is kind of why we have sailing ships as the foundation of the Earthship Program.
And then growing up, did you have role models who loved sailing or earned a living via the maritime trade, be it friends, family, or relatives?
I did not. I went to sea per force because I was crossing the street when I asked, his name is David Stiles, and I asked him where the park was, and he said, "You're crazy, come upstairs with me." He got me off on the big sailing vessel. That the concept had never even occurred to me. And the only reason I got the job was I had grown up on an island from the age of 4, so I was pretty handy around the water. And so that's what got me going.
Okay. So then after your bartending and slinging drinks at Club Med, you find your way back to the States, and then it sounds like you ended up going to college. Where did you go, and what did you end up studying?
University of Connecticut, studied economics.
And why did you choose economics?
Well, my mother's second husband impressed upon me that making money was important, and so that made as much sense as anything else. Although I as a little bit of an aside, when I graduated from college, the last exam I passed in was from theater. I did a little theater on the side because I enjoyed it. And the theater instructor said to me, he said, "Drop off your exam at 12:30 on Tuesday." Well, that was a day after I was going to leave on Monday, but I waited till Tuesday. My car was packed, and I stop off at his office and drop it off, and there's the dean of the College of Arts and Science or whatever it was. And they offered me a fellowship, room, book, tuition, and a stipend if I would do a master's in theater. in the coming semester.
Wow.
I said, well, I'm going to Europe to teach skiing in the fall. They said, well, all right. Well, this summer, would you consider doing summer stock with us? I said, well, I'm a painting contractor and I have bids out that I've won. I even have a bid to do some dormitory windows for the university. Stop and go to theater. So the other guy, the dean, I'd never seen him before. He had the little hissy fit and he jumped up and he said, well, Adam, he may have talent, but he's no use to us. Stormed out, and that was the end of my career in theater. 10 years later, I went back and studied the economics of energy in graduate school, as measured in BTUs, not dollars.
Got it. And then after you graduate, what were some of the, a lot ensues, but what were some of the highlights or the broad strokes of your career before you leaned into turning a lost cause into an unlost cause?
Well, I did a year of teaching skiing in Chamonix, France.
Wow.
Yeah, I was an instructor privé. I was not FIS, Fédération Internationale du Ski. No, I was hired by a hotel, and I taught the clients private during the day, and then at night I had a little garret in the upper lofts there, and you could open those little windows like they have, they open up. There was Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc was firmed, right? Just extraordinary experience. I get tears in my eyes when I think how much I missed that winter. But then I went back to the States, but I was still just 25 years old, I think, and still full of a little piss and vinegar. So I went up, I had property. I bought 50 acres in Nova Scotia with a cottage on it. And I went up there and it was boring. So I went to Newfoundland and Lord doing Jesus, boy, them Newfoundlanders are some people. Boy, oh boy, I had a wonderful time. I spent years up there as a fisherman, hitchhiked all around the island. And I finally bought what I believe was the last of the working Newfoundland schooners. And I brought it down to the States, and I didn't have enough money to fix it up, and it probably wasn't worth the effort, so I sold those. And then I went to New York Harbor and started working on what they call stick lighters. And that was a wonderful, wonderful job. Every day we would go to a different ship. My vessel was just like 100 feet long with a big tall mast and a big tall boom, and every day they'd load us up with ship supplies, food, oil, beer, pornographic magazines, whatever the ship wanted, we would go up alongside of them and we'd hoist it aboard. Oh, here's the side you're not going to believe. I still don't believe it. I got aboard a ship one time that had a mixed crew from different places, and I'm sitting there and you could tell I'm not embarrassed about talking, so I was spinning some yarns and everybody's and all of a sudden, somebody who's not even at the table interrupts and says, have you ever been to Cumae, Italy, which is the northern portion of Italy, which is where I went before I went to Mont Blanc? And I said, yeah, why? He said, because I was on the ski patrol with you and we were in the same building. So this guy is teaching his ski patrol at Mont Blanc, and now he's on a tanker in New York Harbor, and there I am. I don't know. That was crazy. We just parted company. So I'm dodging all around. I wanted to earn a master's license. So I couldn't get my time because of the unions. So I went to the Gulf of Mexico and they hired me in a heartbeat. And I was offshore and the vessel was big enough and we were working what they call 6 on, 6 off, which means you're working 12 hours a day instead of 8 hours, which means every day at sea in the Gulf gave me a day and a half towards my license. So I put in a lot of time down there. And then I came back to New York and sat for my master's license when I was about 35 years old. So that's how I became an ocean-going master.
And then before we transition and talk about when you started your own business of barges and whatnot, it sounds like, you've had this super adventurous life moving around to different places and, going on these adventures. Were you searching for something or longing for something and thinking that, these places could kind of complete like the Trivia Pursuit's last slice of the pie, or was that just part of your enjoyment and joy of like discovering new places?
I think it's part of my maladjusted upbringing. I was told, I think about this a lot. Let me tell you something. If I'd been a little bit more mature, a little bit better settled, and at 25 years old, I'd had my fling and I took my economics degree and I started selling stocks or life insurance or something like that, I would become entrenched in the society that we all live in. And I have never, ever, David, been involved in anything. I'm obligated to nobody. I'm loyal to nothing. I just have floated through life as an observer, which, for whatever reason, is what helped me to see what it was everybody else has overlooked. Because if I had something else on my brain, it's very easy to think about anything. Almost everything is more pleasant than what I was able to see. But I was able to see it, and it didn't matter to me. I don't have a wife. I don't have children. Even my Rolodex of girlfriends is getting pretty sparse. So I just was able to see it, and I decided, and I can't tell you, this is why I was attracted to your show. I can't tell you how many times I said to myself, you've got to quit this. This is nonsense. Nobody's listening. Nobody cares. Stop doing what you're doing. But then I began to realize the consequences of what I saw. And I said, I can't live with myself if I turn my back on this. I'd rather go broke, which I keep telling Zari I'm going to do every time I send her a paycheck. No, she's good. She's a good sport. She's a good sport. So I keep saying to myself, if I have to spend the last friggin' penny in my life, and I'm on the street as a bald-headed 79-year-old man with no place to go and nothing to do, so be it. At least I know I gave it a shot. And so that's why I'm here. And by the way, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but if this podcast fails, I'm probably on the street.
Oh, good Lord. All right. So then at 35, you return to the Northeast and you have enough hours, you sit for the exam, and I take it you pass. And then what's the next major chapter for you?
I'm working on tugs again because I had the tug supply vessel. It's just a very big ocean-going tug. So I was working on harbor tugs. And then by the time I got to 40, I said to myself, you know what? The union that would not let me in when I was 25 is still giving me problems. So I think I'll fix their fanny. And you know what I forgot? Putting sails on merchant ships. I did that starting at around 31. That's what I did. I don't know if you know or not, but I was the first person in 125 years to put auxiliary wind propulsion onto a modern merchant ship. That's why I went back to study the economics of energy.
So a quick question on that. So most of these ocean-going vessels, commercial ships, I would imagine, to a layperson, they use diesel and to propel themselves. By putting these auxiliary sails, how much energy do they save, or how much can they increase their speed?
That is the question I was hoping you would ask. Just sign right here, David. We'll get sails on your ship. I didn't know. And guess what? Nobody else knew either. Going to graduate school, studying what I did, I learned absolutely nothing about putting sails on ships. I was still a guess, but I was able to raise the money. And by the way, raising the money for sails on ships is not entirely unlike what I'm doing now with climate change, because nobody would listen to me when I told them what I wanted to do and what I thought would work. Nobody, I couldn't get a phone call returned, let alone a meeting. And then at some point, OPEC, if you may remember, turned down the valve and oil supplies were decreased. And we had gas lines, we had an alternate day of the buying and all that stuff. Well, guess what? If you inconvenience the wife of a man who happens to be a venture capitalist in New York City, you've got an end. If she's pissed off, she's got to set in line, and I'm coming in telling them I can save oil. That's it. It was the energy bubble. I was right there at the beginning of the save energy bubble because people were really upset about the gas lines and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I raised the money to put the sails on a merchant ship. Now, I had to figure out how it's going to work. Well, my graduate thesis, I studied the fuel efficiency on merchant ships as a merchant seaman. That was my topic. And I focused on hull roughness, and I did some studies. I did some actual empirical work on a ship, measuring the vessel speed through the water and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So when I had to figure out how much wind power and how much oil I was saving, I had to get what they call a speed log, which came from France, and put that way up in the bow of the ship. And then my graduate thesis, I had a guy that was a yachtsman who was supplying the equipment. He made me a little box, and there's all the things I needed: fuel consumption, wind speed, ship speed, whatever else it was. Yeah, it's in the video. I don't know if I sent it to you or not.
And then what was the impact? What was the...
I could cut fuel consumption on a beam reach when the sails are set at a beam reach by up to 30 to 35%. Or I could increase the speed by about a knot and a half. And that's what the records, that's what the data showed me. And I had a guy who's going to take my company public. He's a rather infamous guy. What was it? Oh, I forgot his name now. Anyway, I went to see him, and he said, I'll take you public and you'll keep 40% of the stock, which was a whole lot better than any other offer I had. He said, all you got to do is give me a year's worth of data. Well, guess what? This is very important. 363 days later, OPEC lost control of the oil market. The market crashed, and there was nobody interested in saving oil anymore. The ship owner took a blowtorch, cut off my mast, left them on a dock in Galveston, and now guess what? I'm broke again. And I don't own that house in Nova Scotia anymore either. That was on the line. So that's my sailing ship story. So after the sailing ship, then I went into the tug company. Here's something interesting. Once again, when you're doing something new that nobody's done before, nobody wants to talk to you. But when I wanted to raise money for a tug company and come into New York Harbor non-union, people could understand. You move oil from A to B. You do it once with a union company, once without a union. You have extra profit. This is something that registered very well with the people in New York. So I was able to raise money within a year. I'd raised, about $6, $7, $8 million, and I bought some old equipment, and I'm operating in New York. Then by 1988.
And then a quick question about this, because you said it was mainly union tugs. So why didn't anyone else start non-union, and what enabled you to do that versus, someone else? Was there just no rules that said you had to be union, but no one had the chutzpah to do it, and you did, and you're able to get business by lower rates?
Yeah, some of them did it. Their bodies are still floating. I'm not sure why they failed. I did nothing special. I have no special skills and none of that sort. But I did call the timing correctly. When the other companies they tried, and there had been several others, and I'd known some of them. I actually worked for some of them. One of them was a Jewish woman, Evelyn Berman. They called her the Dragon Lady. She made grown men shake in their boots. She was so tough. But these other companies have come and they've gone. But the way the union would beat them is when everybody would go out on strike, the union would then find the weakest company, go to them and say, we want you to go back to work and we're going to cut you a special deal. You're going to get a good deal on this. The other people aren't going to get it. So that company would then go back to work. And the other companies that are sitting around knowing they're losing their customers, they would come back in. So that's why they did it. But when I saw it coming, I was working on a tug company, one that was trying to come in non-union, and they failed. But right at that point, we were just a few months away from a strike. And so I asked the other union operators, what are you going to do for the strike? And they said, we're not giving in this time. We're hiring excess crew so we can keep operating after the strike comes. So I said, okay, now's the time to raise some money and come in, because they're not going to come after me so long, because they're going to be other union companies are going to be operating, but with non-union crew. And as far as I know, I operated for 5 years, and the union had not regained the strength. And by the time I sold my equipment, the union had folded. So I'm thinking that maybe me being there might have given a little impetus for the other operators to stick to their guns and not give in, stuff like it. But an interesting thing that I did, though, and I can tell you about it because the statute of limitations has run out. But when I'm sitting on my barge in the wintertime with no work, I knew a guy who knew a guy. One thing led to another. And I actually went to work for the Russian mob. I smuggled gas on behalf of the Russian mob, the Russian Jews, we call them, the Russian mob. I was an outsider. I had to go to a private meeting in the beginning, but I never saw anybody after that. And I just got the orders and I filled them and I did what I was supposed to do. And I worked for them, not that many, about 6 months. And then one day I'm coming by Coney Island Creek which is where their tanks and everything was, and it's full of police cars. And it's covered with police cars. And the FBI had been watching them all along. And at some point, they decided to spring. And when they did, none of my equipment was in there, and none of my equipment had any of their oil in the tanks. So I skated on that one.
And then, go ahead.
I'm interested. This is when I really started to get interested in something I thought was really big, and that was climate change. And that's when I launched this effort.
Okay, so then is it in 1988 that you sold your barge business?
Oh, no, I didn't sell the barge business until the mid-'90s.
But it was 1988 that you had this epiphany?
Yeah, but I didn't know it was climate change. I didn't know it was. I knew the weather was changing. I mean, I'm a sailor. I know things are happening that are not supposed to happen. I had not the faintest idea what it was.
What would you say if someone says, well, I mean, there's always outliers and extremes, even over the hundreds or thousands of years, and it was just an extreme incident. What would you say to them as someone who's on the water and very attuned to the climate?
When I began to understand that it was carbon, I have a sense of the Earth's ecosystem and how I'm not a geologist or a meteorologist, but I have a sense that the ecosystem moves slowly. And I could see that once you put that carbon back in the atmosphere, it isn't going to go away. And parenthetically, that is at the key. When you burn fossil fuels, the carbon is released. It's now back in the carbon cycle and back in the atmosphere. And you know who knows this? Elon Musk. I heard him say it in a meeting, and he said it as he turned away from the mic. He said something, and as he turns away from the mic, he said, and it never goes back. You know how Elon Musk is. He's not too tightly wound. So he knows this, and yet he's still trying to sell electric vehicles to the public when 82% of the energy that's being burned by an electric car comes from fossil fuels. And Ford Motor Company got caught in this. Ford Motor Company used to run ads for their electric cars saying, use our electric cars. There's no exhaust. And then somebody called them out and they changed their ad. And now they say, use Ford electric cars. There's no tailpipe exhaust. And the difference is if the fossil fuels are burned by a generating plant to make the electricity, or they're burned by the car to create mechanical energy, what's the difference? You're still burning the fossil fuels. So that just is a little bit of an aside. It kind of annoys me that he's making such a big deal about being pro-environment when he's furthest thing from it.
So then you get this, you say it's maybe not an epiphany, but 1988 was a spark or a key moment. What were some of the other ones that started layering on top of that, despite the fact that you said that you're not a scientist, but because you've been able to float around in life and through society with like a different viewpoint, perhaps you've been endowed or gifted with this ability to not be as tethered and see things differently than others may.
The word, you keep using these great words, just maladjusted. Untethered is one word, maladjusted is another. I'm not sure. I talked a lot about it, and I've read a lot about it. I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I had a neighbor who got sick of me talking about it. And so he gave me a book called Preparing for the 21st Century. And the professor's last name was Kennedy, and he works in the Dilworth Center at Yale. And I read the book, and it changed my life. I said, I don't know enough. I don't know as much as this guy. I've got to go back and get a doctorate in economics because I'm sure it'll explain everything to me. And I didn't go very far down that path, but I contacted him and David Pimentel, a professor of climate science and demographics at Cornell. He has since passed. And I loved him. He was just the best. And he told me, I wanted him to be an advisor to me to do my doctorate. And he told me, he said, Captain Anderson, we don't need another PhD thesis collecting dust. You're a doer. Get out there and do something. So that was probably what got me to put it down. Plus, I didn't want to go back to school.
Yeah. And then so when you sold your tug business, were you already set that you were going to dive deeper into climate change? Or were you thinking, I'm going to just keep exploring life, traveling different places, or maybe go to Florida and play golf?
I never took up golf, thank goodness. I was pretty sure I was going to dig deeper into it. I didn't know what I was going to do. I ended up being the keynote speaker at the Organization of Non-Aligned Nations in Havana, Cuba, around that time sometime. And I spoke on alternative energies. And it was quite an experience. Actually, they took us to a shipyard on the western end of the island. And there I actually put my hands on Hemingway's boat, To Have It, To Have Not, or what was it? It was To Have It, To Have Not. That's the one where he was based on the yacht out of Key West. And it was still there. Yeah. I actually sat on the bar stool where Hemingway sat when he went to La Floridita. So anyway, I lectured there. So I was getting good at it. And I was asked to speak at some universities in the New York area as a guest lecturer and nothing else, because I'm not making it up, but I'm projecting here. I don't think the professors could speak out in quite as strong a language to their students because they were part of the establishment. That's what my guess is, and I've seen it throughout. I'm actually going to read you some professors here. So they would bring me in and they would allow me to present my more extreme version of what was happening to the client. But again, I did not know about climate change. I mean, I did not know about the carbon ratio. That's the deal.
Were you going to read something or?
Oh.
Or you, if not, then I've got another question that's burning.
Okay, all right. I wanted to let you know what I've identified and why other people have it and how really important that is.
Yeah, so let's go to that, right? And so when I was preparing for this, you alluded to it. So I kept reading until I found out this whole idea about the carbon ratio. So before you share it with the UnLost Cause community, can you share like how the pieces started coming together for you? Because I don't think was it an aha moment, or was it you kept on putting these pieces together before you saw the complete picture?
It was a graph I pulled off of NASA's website. And it wasn't an aha moment. It was a holy shit moment, if you'll forgive me. I mean, I said, I can't believe this. How could we be? Why is everybody looking at the friggin' weather? And so since then, I uncovered how the whole world got headed in the wrong direction, including myself, by the way. And we were taught to look at the weather, the statistical variations between extreme weather events, right? Well, floods, droughts, storms, melting ice, hurricanes, all that stuff. Well, that's true. That gets people shook up. People get shook up by the weather. We look at the weather every day. We hear it on the news every day. Weather is simply a symptom of the problem. And I didn't figure that out. I hate to use the term figure it out because there's nothing to figure out. It's common sense. But I didn't use enough common sense to understand we were looking at it the wrong way until I saw this graph. And here, David, I'm going to ask you to insert a particular graph, which I'm going to show to you. Okay. Now, so that's what it was. That graph has got me started. And that's how I realized that we have all been looking at climate change the wrong way. It's vastly complex. NASA has a scientist here, the head of the meteorology department, Dr. James Hansen. He deserves a ton of credit because he was the first man in modern time who was able to tease out from the data a trend line. And he was with NASA, so he had data from all over the world for 40 years. That's a lot of data. And he's a scientist, so he doesn't want to commit himself to anything until he's absolutely certain that's what's happening. So he teased out the line and he saw, the Earth is warming up slightly. And so he went before Congress and he explained the problem to Congress. He explained it using the same terminology and the same technique he used to discover it in the first place. So he talked about statistical variations in extreme weather events. And he gave, I don't know, I'm making this up, but, the temperature of Southwest Texas over the last 10 years is going up 1.24 degrees. But if you go back over 40 years, it's going up a full 2 degrees. I mean, I don't get that. Congress didn't get it. They understood little and they did even less. So Jim Hansen went out into the world and did as only a good scientist would do. He continued to preach about these weather variations he saw that indicated the problem. And I bought it. I bought it along with everybody else. When I was in Havana, I lectured talking about the weather. When I would go to universities, I couldn't talk about the carbon ratio. I didn't know what it was. So I talked about the weather, but I used strong language. I said, this isn't going to turn around. This isn't going to stop. But then it wasn't 2019. I saw the graph I showed you.
Got it. And then what year was it when this carbon ratio idea or epiphany hit you, and share that with the UnLost Cause community?
Yeah, it was 2019 when I looked at that graph on NASA's website, and I saw it was the Earth's temperature over 800 million years. And the graph, you can see my finger, goes up and down and goes all over the place, and it scoops down to zero and all of this up. There are many people who've come up with that same graph, but I chose this one by Dr. Christopher Scortese, now a retired, I believe, climate scientist. I used his graph because there's less noise. There was less attention to all the other variables. It was just the Earth's temperature over a long period of time. And they all flattened out at the top. So I looked at that graph many times, but you've heard stories about this. People who are concerned about something a lot, and they think about it, and they rack their brains, and they can't get it right. It happened to a guy when he was trying to figure out a cure for cancer. He said it came to him in the shower. Well, it came to me one night, sitting here by myself, just staring at that, thinking of nothing. And then I said to myself, well, why does the temperature flatten out? Other graphs go up and down and up and down. Why does this flatten out? Are they trying to save paper or something? So I got thinking about it. That's when it dawned on me. The number of carbon atoms on the planet, the amount of carbon on the planet today is exactly the same as it was when the Earth first formed. That's the law of conservation of matter. It's the same. And then I got to thinking, well, there are three reservoirs. There's the atmosphere, there's the Earth, and there's the ocean. And the carbon moves around them. It's complicated. It's called organic chemistry. And it moves around, and the PhDs keep track of it, the carbon cycle and all this mess. But I read right around the same time, I don't know, I should probably write down the names of these articles I'm reading, but I didn't. But the article said, scientists are not sure why the balance between the three reservoirs is always maintained. So then I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, so if that's true, then when the maximum amount of carbon that's available to go into the atmosphere is in the atmosphere, well, then obviously that's as hot as the Earth can get. Can't get any hotter, because carbon is the only thing that heats the Earth atmosphere. For example, for every 10,000 molecules of atmosphere, you need only 4 molecules of CO2 to keep the Earth blue and green and livable. That's a very powerful molecule. Carbon is a very powerful device when it comes to heating the Earth, if you only need 4 of them for every 10,000 of air. So when the Earth flattens out, when it's got the maximum amount of carbon into it. And then I began to think, well, yes, that's true. But when you take the carbon out of the atmosphere, a very tiny, small amount of it, and you convert it to fossil fuels, then that carbon is no longer in the atmosphere, but it's no longer in the carbon cycle either. So fossil fuels become the fourth reservoir for carbon. So now we have the atmosphere, the ocean, the Earth, and fossil fuels. That's a reservoir. We've been dumping CO2. We've been creating fossil fuels from CO2 for a very long time. The carbon, we don't make coal anymore. But coal was made during the Carboniferous period. That was 300 million years ago. And I read somewhere that at the peak of the Carboniferous period, 100 tons of coal were created every day. That's a little hard for me to understand, but that's a lot of carbon. So as that carbon's coming out of the Earth, there's less carbon in the carbon cycle. Now we're moving forward by millions of years. We have the Earth is doing well. We have these giant lizards on Earth called dinosaurs, and they disappeared 65 million years ago. And then it was another 15 million years before the Earth began to cool. So, in other words, the asteroid hitting the Earth would be considered a perturbation as far as the dinosaurs are concerned, because they disappeared. But it's such a small event that it didn't even appear on Dr. Scortese's graph. Just went right, they didn't even bother with that little bump. But 15 million years later, the Earth began to cool, and the curve comes down very slowly over 50 million years, hits bottom at about close to zero, and then it starts up again. And that's where we are. That's where we come in. So now this is all beginning to make a little bit more sense to me. But then I'm going to show you another graph, and you can put that in at this point. And I began looking at this. I drew it myself, and my lady friend helped me actually. Three graphs, three circles for the Earth. In one circle, the Earth is surrounded by carbon. It's too hot for life. In another circle, there's very little carbon in the atmosphere, and there's no life because it's frozen over. The third one, the one we're living in now, there's a lot of carbon in the Earth, but there's also some carbon in the atmosphere, and so we are blue and green and livable. Now, that would be fine if that was a static situation, but it's not static. We're not making coal. That ended 300 million years ago, but we are still pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere every minute of every day through photosynthesis in cyanobacterium. Cyanobacterium it's photosynthetic, it's blue-green algae, but when that algae dies, it takes the carbon that's still in it and goes to the bottom of the ocean. And the sediments keep piling up, and that carbon gets eventually compressed and heated and chemically changed. That carbon is no longer in the carbon cycle. The way I look at it would be, I like to look at it as a lottery cage. The atmosphere is a lottery cage. And in the atmosphere, we have ping pong balls, right? If you have too many ping pong balls in the lottery cage, nobody wins, people lose interest, and the game fails. If you have too few balls in the cage, everybody wins, the lottery can't pay, so it fails. So what you have to do is you have to have just the right mix. Well, the lockbox, where the excess balls are came, that's the fossil fuels. So fossil fuels, people like to think of them as they're an entitlement or a birthright. They're not. Fossil fuels is a windfall, and we blew it. We bleeped up. I said bleeped up so you didn't have to bleep up, fucked up. So I'm just saving you a little time there.
So that becomes a foundation for the idea of the carbon ratio.
That's it in a nutshell. I probably wasn't a nutshell on my end, but I went on.
Well, there's a lot there, and I appreciate you going through the steps and explaining it to the audience. And then if one of the things that you did say is like, hey, David, I'm not going to give the warm and fuzzies. I'm going to give you the facts based upon what I know. So if we drag and drop this out, I don't know, decades or hundreds of years, I don't know, however time frame you want, what do you think the reality will be at this trajectory is the first question. And then the second one is, what can we do about it?
Let me be very clear. None of your viewers are going to like this, but I can support everything I've said with very easily verifiable science. The human race will go extinct in not that much more time. And you'll allow me to allude to the webpage. I make that clear on my website under the heading, The Hard Truth. Under The Hard Truth, it explains what we've overlooked. It explains why we've overlooked it and the fact that we will go extinct. Now, I want to read a couple of things here because I've been bumping up against the scientific community. In fact, Monday, just yesterday, I sent a proposal to a woman at Harvard, and it is what I would call, it's the best document I've ever created, and I would call it an ass-kicking document. And the reason I sent it to her is her name is Naomi. I can't say the last name. I don't want to make a fool out of myself, but it's Naomi Ez or something like that. She is an avid advocate for doing something about climate change. But the reason she's important to me is while she is a PhD, while she is passionate about doing something about climate change, while she is social media crazy, she's all over everywhere, she's not a climate scientist. That's the key. That's the key. And here's some examples.
Before you give the example, and when you say the human race is going to go extinct, that's pretty bold and jarring, as you mentioned. What's the timeline, approximately? If you had
everybody has it. On my website, there's something there called the Climate Change Accelerator.
And then tell the viewers, what's the website URL?
Earth, the planet we live on, EARTH -ship Sierra Hotel Indigo Papa.com or .org. That's where the captain comes from.
So earth-ship.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
That will do it. And the hard truth is there. I forgot the question.
Oh, and when will we all go extinct if we don't go to Mars?
Yeah. If we left it to climate change and climate change alone, I don't know. But I will say this, hot weather bothers people more than cold weather. And we're going to get some wicked hot weather. Of course, we're going to go in air conditioning as long as possible, all the while putting more carbon in the air, which parenthetically doesn't matter because there's already more carbon in the atmosphere than is needed to drive us to extinction. So, what do we do? We're throwing fire, throwing gas on a burning house. Okay, whatever the case may be. But that's where I come in with my economic background. And now I'm going to throw in a variable. And the variable is something I did not talk about in college. This same variable I did not hear anybody discussing 10 years later in graduate school. But right now, the variable of optimism is probably the most important variable for anybody to worry about. We are a capitalistic society. We are based on consumption. 70% of the GDP is consumption. Capital investments are all people worry about. You don't make a capital investment. No individual, no family, no corporation. Nobody extends themselves financially unless they feel optimistic about something. Their health, their family, their location, their job, their 401k, the climate. Nobody is going to invest in anything if they start to get nervous. If that's the case, what will happen is small companies, small operations will fail because people aren't buying. When they begin to fail, when businesses begin to fail, and some would say it's already begun in some places, then the tax base shrinks. And we know the tax base shrinks because we know small towns are selling off their social services, garbage of police, some institutions, job that out to other people. So the tax base is going to shrink eventually, and it's going to happen. This is absolutely, positively inevitable. If you look at things that people are worried about, plastic in the oceans or AI or population or whatever little peeve people have, all of them combined, climate change is a threat multiplier. Optimism is going to happen to a greater extent from this point forward. When that happens, expenditures decrease. When that happens, the tax base shrinks. And when that happens, social services begin to shrink. And that, in turn, will cascade across the country and around the world. So climate change is not going to kill us directly. Climate change is going to kill us indirectly. And I don't have the time frame. You ask yourself that same question. How long before optimism disappears?
Yeah. And then so in the backdrop of this, you came up with also an alternative or a solution?
No, there is none.
Oh, there is none.
There is none. No. We have the only two options we have are as follows. We can not plan and collapse. We will collapse into anarchy, violence, war, and untold human suffering. That is inevitable. We're not a very nice animal. Human beings are not a nice animal. We're tribal, we're territorial, and we're the most vicious thing that ever lived on the earth. So what's going to happen to our civilization when it suddenly dawns on people that we're bleeped? What are we going to do then? How are people going to behave? Your guess is as good as mine, and I am not particularly optimistic. I don't know if I even want to be here when the proverbial poop hits the fan. So that's one option. The other option we have at this point, and this is what I explained to Harvard University in my proposal, is that you can't speak out openly like I can. No corporation can, no government can, no institution could speak out with the kind of information that I have without huge repercussions. It is anathema to this economy that we're in now to talk about anything other than continual growth. And nobody's going to do it because nobody's in a position to do it. No university wants to shoot themselves in the foot and lose membership because they're full of bad news. Well, I'm full of bad news, and I'll tell anybody that'll listen. So that's where am I, David?
Yeah. So then with this bad news, why did you start the Earthship? What is the purpose behind that? Just to spread the bad news to everyone, to wake them up, or?
That's kind of not a very nice way of spreading the bad news. After all, David, I didn't create the bad news. You understand?
No, I get it.
I'm just reporting on it. Earthship Program will. I'm not a religious person. I'm very proud of the fact that I've never had religion since I played Little League. So I will use a quote from the Bible that says that was a Gospel of Job or something like 8:32 or something like that. Learn the truth. because the truth will set you free. In this case, I'm going to tell the world what they need to know. And I think it's going to work for the most part for the best, because Alex Azar, who was the first head of the task force, he was hired by Donald Moptop. I call him Donnie Moptop. That's the president, Donnie Moptop. So Donnie Moptop hired Alex Azar until Alex Azar said the following, and it's in writing, and I quote him all the time. If you tell the people the truth, they will generally do the right thing. So it's not a promise they're always going to do it, but generally speaking, most of the people will do the right thing if they know the truth. The world has not been told the truth about climate change. The heading on my organization's website says, in order to have the optimum response, you must accurately identify the problem. Climate change has not been accurately identified, and that's the truth, because we all got headed in the wrong direction. We all got looking at the weather, and that's what happened. We dug ourselves a hole we can no longer get out of. Having said that, if Jim Hansen had gone before Congress in August of 1988 and explained to the world the carbon ratio and how dire it was, we would be living in a much different world today, for sure, but we would not have stopped the ultimate collapse and extinction of our species. In 1988, it was already the carbon ratio. I don't know what the carbon ratio was in 1988. Many, many decades ago, the carbon ratio had to be 1. We know that. That's common sense. We know there had to be, at some point, the amount of carbon coming out of the atmosphere into fossil fuels and the amount of carbon going back in the atmosphere from combusting fossil fuels had to be equal. I don't know when that day was, but I do know in 2023, the carbon ratio was 6.7. So we're putting into the air at a real minimum 670% more carbon than nature is taking out. Carbon is the only thing that heats the atmosphere. So we're gone as a species. So what do? I'll ask you. I'll turn the question over to you. Suppose you and I are in a rowboat and there's a storm and we're blown offshore and we wake up in the morning and there you and I sit with no food, a little bit of water. The ocean is calm. We don't know where land is. It's a long ways away. And during the night, during the storm, we sprung a plank and the water is coming in. And you're not a seaman, you're a fisherman. And you see the water coming in around your ankles and you pretty quickly come to the conclusion that the boat is going to sink. But you know you're not going to be able to swim to shore, but you're not sure. You're not absolutely sure you can't swim to shore wherever it is. So you're faced with a dilemma. Bail or drown. What are you going to do, David? You're going to bail or are you just going to give up? And the fact is, we're human beings. We're the smartest animal that's ever lived on the planet. We have to organize ourselves and have an orderly contraction. That's coming out of the mouths of a half-assed economist. And I'm telling you, we've got to collapse. We've got to contract.
And if we do that, what about the people who say that, never underestimate the power of human ingenuity and innovation? Like, back in the days in New York City, there was too much horse manure because of all the horse buggies, and then that problem went away. And, now with the rise of AI, although it does take a lot of carbon because it takes a tremendous amount of energy, but then solving these problems and these carbon sequestering startups and so forth, do you think that the power of human optimism or innovation won't be enough to stem the tide actually reverse the tide? Because you already said that the status quo right now is it's already there's a time lag. So we have to take stuff out of the carbon out of the environment.
Didn't you answer your own question or not? I think you did. No, you can't put the carbon back in the atmosphere. Ring Elon Musk and say, what happens to the carbon when you take it out of the ground? And he'll tell you, I don't know, but it's not going back in the ground again. And carbon is the most powerful thing to heat the atmosphere. And the lag time, which on the website is under the page carbon delay, the carbon delay is measured in decades ago. The heat we're feeling now is carbon released decades ago because it takes a long time for carbon to diffuse through the atmosphere. And the scientists say, for reasons I don't fully understand, they say it doesn't do the maximum amount of heating to the Earth until it gets higher in the atmosphere. Now let's see. One of the graphs I'd like to insert here, I'm also going to show you exactly how hot the Earth is going to get based on the amount of carbon being recorded at the Mauna Loa Observatory right now. It's a little graph. So there's already infinitely more carbon in the atmosphere than is needed. In fact, what I've done with my calculation is based on Mauna Loa and based on the readings in 2019, when I did this work, there's enough carbon in the atmosphere to raise the Earth's ambient temperature to 81.8 degrees. Now, most people, they see 81.8, they're thinking a nice day at the beach. But this is the ambient temperature. The ambient temperature when our planet was blue and green and livable was only 56. And scientists say, I can't verify this, but scientists say if the Earth's temperature gets to 64, then our species, never mind our civilization, that's long gone, but our species will have trouble surviving because we have skin, we don't have hair, and the heat's going to kill us. And by that time, our civilization will have caved in, and so we're going to have trouble surviving. Right now, we're at 59.1.
And then, Captain Anderson, on this journey of understanding the data and seeing the carbon ratio, do you have collaborators or partners that you from around the world that you maybe a small group of folks that see it the same way as you, or is this truly a solo journey right now?
It's truly a solo journey, but I'm only using information determined by scientists from all over the world. Ask yourself, how is it possible that the United Nations much vaunted IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, these guys are still fretting over the fact that the Earth is going to warm up to 1.5 C, which is about 1.5 centigrade, which is about 2.7 Fahrenheit. Well, we've already passed 2.7 Fahrenheit. And if the UN is worried about 1.5 or 2.7 Fahrenheit, why does the World Bank say, or used to say, we've already got 5 degrees locked in? The World Bank must know something. They're not telling they're not bragging about it, but they had said we got 1.5 degrees is locked in, but they have since changed that. They now say we've got 7 degrees locked in. So the World Bank is saying we're bleaked. We're bleak because there's already enough carbon to heat us. So there are people who know what I know, but they're not talking about it, David. They're not talking about it because they're a huge institution and they're part of the system. I'm neither huge nor part of the system. And that's the proposal I made to Harvard. You guys can't say anything. And so we're being led down the primrose path by people who cannot or will not tell the public the truth. And in the last 10 years, I haven't found anybody that knows the truth like I know it. So, and by the way, I'm no genius, pal. I'm Joe Average here. I mean, I'm not stupid, and I am innovative, but there's no great intellectual power at work here.
And then, there's that adage that it's lonely at the top, especially since, this is going against a lot of the prevailing winds out there. So how do you keep motivated and, pushing while knowing that, hey, this is a bit of an uphill fight right now?
Zaria Cobbs is the young lady who's helped me into social media, but she's not the one to tell me to do it. People have been telling me to get on social media for a decade, but I am too friggin' arrogant to think I have to appeal to people I don't know or anything. I've got a good idea. The financing of this project is based on a leveraged tax shelter. So I can raise literally tens of millions of dollars and give the corporation a profit. So it's just too good an idea to stop. But David, this is what attracted me to your show. I have wanted to quit. I can't tell you how many times. But I read one time somewhere that when a man's brain expands to encompass a new idea, it very seldom shrinks back to what it was. You can't see it. I'm getting goosebumps on my arms. I have to keep telling myself that. I have to. Knowing what I know and knowing what I am absolutely certain is going to happen in the coming decade, I just can't. I couldn't turn my back on humanity. Humanity has to come together and realize the damage has been done. I'm sorry. My generation, what did we worry about? When I was very young, they worried about civil rights. When I was in high school, they worried about Vietnam. When I was in college, they worried about Watergate. We fixed all these problems. And getting back to you and your technology, that's bullshit. Absolute, complete nonsense. But since we've always gotten through every problem we've ever had to face, we've teched our way out of everything, I can't fault people who think we could do something else. So the purpose of the Earthship Program is to tell other people what I know, but do a better job of explaining it than I have done today with you. I haven't done that good a job. But
And then let's just say you're phenomenally successful. You get on social media and you do all this stuff and everyone knows your name, you're a household name, and the carbon ratio is being taught in schools. What happens next?
I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. All I can do is tell people the truth and let the chips fall where they may. I cannot tell.
So truly, you don't have an agenda other than trying to get others to see it the way you do.
All right. You backed me into a corner, so now I'm coming out. The gloves are off, David. Gloves are off.
Yeah, share with the listeners.
The average person has no power at all to combat climate change, but en masse, we do have a power. All right, and then we have two forces. One is our votes, and one is our dollars. Our dollars are spent or not spent as we choose. If enough people come together and say, that's it, we're done, we're going to go away anyway, I want to live on Earth for as long as possible. Some people, and there are many of them, I'm sure there are, that say, well, if the end is near, man, I'm going to live it up and have a good time. And I hear that occasionally from people. But what we're going to have to do is tell the public to stop spending on anything other than the very basic essentials for food and housing. Stop it. Just have to stop it. We're going to go away. Stop spending. Just stop it. And if enough people stop, that's going to have an economic impact. And if it has an economic impact, and hopefully by then Donnie Mop-Top will be gone, and we'll have a reasonable person in the White House instead of an irrational narcissist, then I think America has led the world in the past. I mean, if we had a Barack Obama in the White House now, there's a guy who can outthink most people. He could outthink me in a heartbeat. But he would help steer America. America has led during the wars. We led during the Industrial Revolution. We led during the Technological Revolution. We started the energy savings bubble. We can lead again, but this time we're going to have to lead by example. We can't lead by military force. We can't lead by economic persuasion. We have to show the world that we've made a mistake, and America can do it. And I think we're in the best position to do it because we have the biggest military. So if the world wants to think we're weak by shrinking the economy, they're wrong. We can show almost any country how tough we are and how forceful we can be. So it's the only thing we can do. That's with the dollars. That's how we use our dollars. Secondly, what are we going to do about our votes? What I'm going to suggest to you is so obvious. I sometimes shake my head. I said, why hasn't somebody done this before? We're going to change the way we select candidates. I didn't say elect. We're going to elect them the same way with a vote. But the fact that it takes tens and $20 million to get yourself onto the ballot for a representative is $10 million. A Senate is $20 million. You've got to get a lot of backing. And that's where the word politics comes from. Our founders never used the word politics. Politics never came in until the early 1800s. And that happened because competition for the position made more than one man or one woman want the job. So there was competition. And that's generally settled with what? Power. The strongest one wins. Power in politics is money. So we drag the money into the system. Now anybody who gets into office owes somebody a lot of favors. And that's what politics is. You trade favors, you kiss behinds, you do fundraising, you do all the stuff you need to do to stay in office. Our foundational government, the Congress, should work just like a jury does. A jury is picked out of the public, right? Well, we can't take absolutely anybody. We're going to set the bar pretty high as far as character and education and so on and so forth. But we're going to just select people and say, go to Washington and vote. You don't have to worry about getting reelected. You don't have to run for office. We're going to get your name because we're going to pull them out of a lottery. We're going to set the lottery so that I imagine 10 million people from every state will be eligible to hold a higher office. And their name goes into the lottery whether they like it or not. Now, if somebody has an excuse that they have a problem, they're a sole parent or any other things that they just don't want to do and it's a valid one, well, we take their name out of the lottery. But if you want to be in the jury, same thing. We picked you because you're a good citizen. The prosecution and the defense, they seem to get along with you. You've got to sit there. Now, those people, 12 people, are imbued with the responsibility of deciding whether somebody lives or dies. There's no congressman that's ever going to have to make a decision like that. No senator would ever have to make a decision like that. In fact, with this new system, I want to bring the Senate and the House together. Do you know, David, you have to know why we have two houses of Congress?
To balance the power in the small states versus the bigger ones from a population standpoint?
Yes, that was it. In the beginning, when Vermont had very few people and New York had a lot, Vermont wanted two from each state. But New York said, no, we want it based on population. And they called Benjamin Franklin back from France. And he interviewed both sides, and both sides had a very valid argument. So in his wisdom, he said, we're going to have two houses of Congress. And so that's why we have it. All of this now is just bureaucratic mess. We don't need two houses of Congress. We need just one. So combine them, pick them from the lottery. When a congressman comes up for re-election, you will have picked four names out of the group, four names, and you will put those four names and four resumes on every newspaper, on every television, and everywhere for a month. And the public will have to choose from this. And you know what? The public chooses now based on nonsense, on name recognition. And when George Bush Jr., a reformed alcoholic, was appointed by his father, he was a flunky. They made a movie called W, right? That's when I knew this has got to stop. The only purpose of a government is to govern. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say we must entertain 24/7. No, we have to govern. And now, by the way, parenthetically, that we're in a shrinking economy, we don't need two houses of Congress. We don't need Republicans and Democrats. We only use them when the economy was growing and expanding and there was huge taxes and there was money left over, and then the right and the left would fight about where to put the money, and that was always resolved. That's terrific. I understand that. Those days are over. We now have to behave like a general when his army is retreating. Save as many men as possible, fight off the enemy when you can, but we've got to retreat to save as many people as possible.
And then, so Captain Anderson, one of the things that we talk about at UnLost Cause is like when people have this passion or this calling, and how they would feel if they were on their deathbed and they didn't take any action. And I know you have a lot of energy around this cause, which is fantastic. How would you feel if it was the opposite and you were on your deathbed and you didn't raise the banner and really put forward this idea in front of the world?
I told you, I thought about it I don't know how many times over the last 15 years. I couldn't do it. I can't stop. I can't stop. When I put sails on merchant ships, there were some times when I didn't think I could make it work. But I did. When I raised money for the tug company, there were times when I said I was coming into New York Harbor non-union, nobody would talk to me. You can't come into New York non-union. Hit the road, pal. I got an investment group from Austria. The head of it was a Canadian guy. They had an office in New York, and I was able to do it. I'll tell you what I did. I walked out of the closing. I'm raising money. I'm putting up almost nothing. And I raised millions of dollars, and I walked out of the closing with 85% of the stock. Can you believe it? That doesn't happen very often. So anyway, when I set out on a project, I get my teeth into something, I had the tenacity of a pit bull suffering with separation issues.
I love it. My
last lady friend said to me, she was so annoyed with me. She said, you're like a dog with a goddamn bone. You just will not let it go. I get near you and suggest something and you growl.
And then, Captain Anderson, are you proud of what you're doing?
I know I'm doing the right thing. I wouldn't exactly say I was proud of it, but I am, when you know what I know, you can't just sit on it. I don't like people. I'm a loner. I live alone. I work alone. I don't have much concern for family or anything, nothing. But I still can't turn my back on something that doesn't work. The driving force in my life is to make things work properly. Non-union tugs in New York, or having a less powerful union in New York, to me made sense. Putting sails on merchant ships, to me, made good sense. I wasn't interested in saving money, but I was interested in preserving, even in the 1980s, an irreplaceable resource. So I'm doing things that make sense. The hard part now is the enormous time lag between the time when the CO2 is released and before it starts to heat the planet. That's what has allowed us to dig the hole we're in now. Yeah. That's what got us where we are, and it's a really big problem. The only option we have, as I say, this is my mantra, don't plan and collapse or plan and contract. Don't plan and collapse into violence and anarchy and human suffering, or plan and contract. We need America to plan and contract and set an example for the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so for someone who's watching, who is holding on to a lost cause and doesn't think that they should, take any action, maybe they're too tired, too old, too busy, not financial resources, what would you tell them?
I wouldn't tell them anything. Personally, I would just tell them to listen to what everybody else says. And that is, if you have an idea, you have to stick with it. If you're really serious and you're in your heart, you believe you're right, then nothing else matters. You must lock onto it, and that's it.
And then, one question that I always like to ask guests is, what ask or request would you have of the UnLost Cause community?
Get me in to see corporate. Get me in to see anybody at corporate. I don't want to talk to the VP of tax or the VP of feel good or the VP of climate change. I need to go to a CEO, and I will sell this deal. I'll close it. Any CEO sits down with me had better have his checkbook handy, because what CEOs are, they're not geniuses. They're not, I don't think, experts in any particular area, but they're a guy that looks at the future. They look, how am I going to steer my company into the environment that I'm moving into now? If I show him the science that I would, like to detail to you, the PowerPoint's about 38 slides, 37 slides, and explain to you how it all unfolded, then you aren't going to drive your company on the same trajectory. You're going to steer your company in the right way. Plus, the money you give me, you don't give me, the money you donate to the charity, I'm going to give that all back to you in year 2, and I'm going to guarantee it. I'm actually even going to escrow money. So you give me a lot of money, but I put it aside and I use it. And if I don't live up to what I tell you I'm going to do, you get it back. And if I don't do quite as well as I wanted to, then I'll give you back enough so that your write-off is guaranteed 3-1. I suspect it'll be higher than that, but I won't guarantee anything other than 3-1. With that corporate money, a third of it will be used to operate the vessels, the sailing vessels. The other 2/3, I will find the right public relations, marketing, advertising people. There are people out there that are skilled at creating movements and spreading something other than great news. There are people out there who know how to do that. So I will use 2/3 of the money I raise and start a global movement called the Earthship Program.
Oh, amazing. And then for the people who have been captivated by this interview and what you've been sharing, now is the time to share. How can they follow you? How can they like you? How can they support websites, books, etc.? Please share all the resources now.
Well, the website is earth-ship.com. The Congress site, the one where we're going to change the way candidates are selected, that's easy to remember. That's fixyourcongress.org. That's all we want. We want to fix the Congress. We want to fix the way. Okay. Oh, and I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, and it's Earthship Program.
Got it. Well, thank you. And we'll have those links in the show notes for people. And, I want to wrap up by saying Captain Anderson, he was a USCG master, maritime innovator, inventor of auxiliary wind propulsion, and published author, refused to slow down in the 70s. He founded Earth-ship.com to expose the root of climate change using a concept he created called the carbon ratio. Captain Anderson proves that ideas can change the world no matter your age. Thank you so much, Captain.
My pleasure, David. Take care.
Before you go, if you're inspired and want to be a part of something bigger, subscribe, like, and share to help more people reclaim their dreams and live true to themselves. Also, let me know if you or someone you know would be an inspiring guest on this show. Together, let's spark courage to live without regrets. The UnLost Cause way, one story and one person at a time.